Good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year. And on behalf of the Village of Cary and the Board of Zoning, Planning, and Appeals, I'd like to hereby call this meeting to order on this Thursday, January the 14th, 2021. The time is approximately 7:05 p.m. Before we begin, we're just going to take a quick roll call, so I'll turn it over to Mr. Simmons for roll call.
Okay. Williams?
Present.
Okay. Kretschmer? Graziano? Here. Jasper?
Here.
O'Loughlin?
Here.
Dudek?
Here.
Walrath?
Here.
Corey?
Here. Thank you very much, Mr. Simmons. Ladies and gentlemen, we invite you to rise with us for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much, everyone. So for our petitioner, I think you may have been through this process before, so I'm not 100% sure. So I'll just walk you through the way I think the process is going to work tonight. We usually ask Mr. Simmons to give us an overview of what this is, and I think most of the ZPA members would agree that it's a very straightforward request. And then we may have some questions for Mr. Simmons. And then upon conclusion, if you want to add any additional comments or color to the request, you're welcome to do that. Then we open it up to the public, and for the record, there's no one physically here at Village Hall beyond the ZPA members and staff. And there may be someone online that's joined our meeting, and I'll ask Mr. Simmons to confirm that when we get to the public comment section. And then we'll close that. And then the ZPA members may want to have some additional discussion about the request. We take a vote, and then that vote gets delivered back to our elected officials, and they would become the final arbiter of our discussion tonight. So that's the process. And before we begin the actual overview, I need to double check with everyone that they did receive their packets and their receipt of our meeting minutes from our last meeting. That would be the hearing date of December the 10th, 2020.
Yes, Dave.
Yes.
Correct. Very good. So by a general consent and voice vote, those in favor of approving the meeting minutes dated December the 10th, 2020, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you, gentlemen. At this time, I'll turn the meeting over to Mr. Simmons for an overview of the request. This will be ZPA case 12001. This is for St. Barnabas Lutheran Church. It's an amendment to a conditional use for an electronic message center, and the location is 8901 Cary Algonquin Road. And over to you, Mr. Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As mentioned, the request this evening is for an amendment to an existing conditional use permit for an electronic message center sign. The church is proposing to replace the existing sign that they have along Cary Algonquin Road with a new monument sign. The overall size of the monument sign would increase, as would the electronic message center. Per the conditions of the ordinance that was originally approved for the sign back in 2008, the increase in size would require amendment to the PUD, the conditional use permit granted for the property. A little brief overview of the property. The property is zoned for single-family residential. The existing church is a allowed use within that district as conditional uses. The history of the site received, again, the conditional use permit from the village for the existing sign back in 2008. And then the village has also approved two separate conditional use permits for two accessory structures which are located along the southern property line of the property. This slide shows both the existing sign and the proposed new sign. As mentioned, they will be replacing the existing monument sign. The issue that's kind of necessitated this change is the existing sign is malfunctioned or is beyond its useful life, so we'll be replacing it with new equipment. And during the time period, the church decided to update their signage for the property to grant or give additional visibility for the preschool and also the food pantry, which are located on the property. The proposed monument sign The total area would be 52 square feet, which complies with code. Maximum is 74 square feet. The EMC panel is proposed on the sign would be about a little under 16 square feet, which complies with the maximum size as permitted within the ordinance of less than 40% of the total sign area. Overall, the sign will comply with other regulations as far as setback and height of the sign within our regulations. This slide summarizes the conditions of electronic message center signs. Essentially, they require conditional use approval, which is the reason for the meeting this evening for the request. They're permitted only on monument signs, cannot exceed 40% of the allowed sign area. The EMC panel, as proposed, this sign panel would consist of about 30% of the sign. Would have to, as far as operation, there's conditions as far as the display of messages, that all messages need to be static in nature. Sign would need to comply with our maximum illumination levels, and then also automatically dim for light levels during different portions of the day. As proposed, the proposed sign will comply with those standards, and those would be conditions as well of approval should the zoning board and village board approve the request. This slide here summarizes the standards that are within the village's Unified Development Ordinance for the consideration and approval of any conditional use permits. Specifically, the use would not be detrimental to or endanger the public health, safety, or general welfare. Use would not substantially diminish or impair the values of property within the immediate vicinity, would not create an overburdening of municipal services, and is generally compliant with policies in the future land use maps. As the board is aware, there's an existing sign on the property, so the proposed sign will not alter the character of the area significantly, but it will provide the church and the food pantry as well additional ability to advertise their services along this roadway. With the information provided and staff's review of the petition, staff believes that the standards in this case have been met. And should the ZPA determine that the various standards have also been met in this case, as recommended, the ZPA recommend approval of amendment to a conditional use to the village board for an electronic message center sign for the property located at 8901 Cary-Algonquin Road, subject to the conditions that are listed in the staff report. This case would be village board final. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have, and the petitioner is also on the call as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Simmons. Gentlemen, before we turn it over to the petitioner, any questions for Mr. Simmons?
Brian, I'm just curious, is the food pantry part of the church or is it separate organization?
I don't know if they're the two, how the entities are married together. The petitioner might be able to give more information on that as far as if they're two separate portions or if the food pantry is part of the actual organization.
So,
Brian, I could address the question if you'd like.
yeah, because then I would have a follow-up, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Hammond. Why don't you proceed with your comment?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, actually, there's two separate businesses that are operated on our facility that are independent businesses. The preschool itself is although affiliated with the church, they run independently, as well as the food pantry. The food pantry, we provide, they actually have a lease with us for the building that's there. They are their own separate, separate entity. They're only they lease the property from us on a long term.
Thank you for that. So then procedurally, my follow-up question is, do you need to have two separate applications when you have two separate tenants, so to speak, in a property?
Good question. In this case, they would not, since the church technically owns the property. It would need to be from the owner of the property and also the petitioner as far as the owner of the sign. So there could be multiple entities that are on the sign, but the church is forwarding the petition is the owner of the sign and the property, so they would be sufficient for the petition.
Okay. Thanks, Brian.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else, Mr. Dudek?
Nope.
Okay. Gentlemen, any more questions for Mr. Simmons before we turn it over to the petitioner? All right, so Mr. Hammond, if you would like to offer any additional comments or color to the petition, we're welcome to hear those at this time.
Thank you. Yeah, so as Mr. Simmons had said, the current sign that we have is about 14 years old, I think, and it's really no longer functioning. So at this point, the sign is we've literally turned it off because the message will scramble and not provide the right kind of messaging. So it's been turned off. The original manufacturer of the sign is out of business, so we can no longer get parts to repair it. And so really replacing it is our only option. So that's the reason we've come forward with the request.
Thank you very much for the clarification on that, those remarks, Mr. Hammond. And let me just double check with the ZPA members and see if there's any additional questions for yourself. So, Mr. Hammond, this is Patrick Hoy, and my one comment is that part of your package, obviously, you had to notify your surrounding neighbors. And I just want to confirm with you whether or not you've received any comments favorably or negatively about this request.
We had not. We did get a request because of the sign that was posted about zoning. And the question was in regards to what is this about? And so we responded to that individual as on social media, just let them know that we're petitioning to replace the current sign, and they were satisfied with that response. But otherwise, we received no other notifications or questions from anybody that we sent the notification to.
All right, thank you very much again for the clarification there. So, gentlemen, any other comments for the petitioner?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this is Pat Jasper.
Hello, Mr. Jasper. Good evening.
I'll put this question forward to both the petitioner and to Brian. I've driven past this sign hundreds of times. However, I'm having trouble recalling it. The question I have refers to the increased height of the sign. And my question is, does the increased height in any way provide any kind of sight blockage for people leaving the facility and entering onto the road, or people turning from the road into the facility?
I can respond to that. The sign location complies with a setback from the roadway or from the property line, and there is a requirement for site triangles for visibility leaving the site, so it would need to comply with those regulations. Also, with the way this site is configured, the entrance or the driveway that's right next to the sign is a enter only, and then the second exit or driveway that the property has further to the south is the primary exit from the property, so it should not impact vehicles entering and exiting the property.
Thank you, Mr. Simmons. And Mr. Hammond, did you want to comment further to Mr. Jasper's question or comment?
Yeah, the only other piece of information I can provide is the sign is roughly about 2 feet taller than the current sign that we have, which is about 6 feet. So I think total sign height would be roughly 8 feet tall. And the setback you can see is where the sidewalk is. It's toward the church on the church side of the sidewalk. So it's a reasonably good setback from the actual roadway.
Thank you, Mr. Hammond. And Mr. Jasper, does that answer your questions, or do you want to probe that further?
It does. I'm finished. Thank you.
You're welcome. Gentlemen, anyone else comments, questions for the petitioner or for staff? All right, hearing that, I'm going to move on to the public comments section. I'm just looking at Mr. Simmons to see whether or not anyone's joined us online. There is no one here in Village Hall beyond the ZPA members and staff. And Mr. Simmons is telling me there is no one online. So we'll close the public comments section. And gentlemen, unless you have additional questions around this request, I'm going to call the motion.
No problem.
Okay. The chair will entertain a motion to approve an amendment to a conditional use for an electronic message center sign for the property located at 8901 Kerry Algonquin Road, subject to the conditions listed in the staff report.
So moved. Second.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Mr. Simmons, would you call the roll?
Jasper,
Yes.
O'Loughlin,
Yes.
Dudek,
Yes.
Walrath,
Yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Graziano,
Yes.
Corey.
Yes. So, Mr. Hammond, you have a favorable recommendation, and as Mr. Simmons articulated at the beginning of the meeting, this is village board final, so I'll leave it with yourself and Mr. Simmons, but theoretically, this gets put on his consent agenda. And typically, that does not necessarily require you to be physically present, but I'll leave that with you and Mr. Simmons to finalize those details. And Mr. Simmons, if you wanted to comment further on that, you're welcome to.
Sure, and the date this will go to the village board for consideration will be the first meeting in February, which is February 2nd.
So, Mr. Hammond, we'll wish you continued success to all of the entities there affiliated with the church. And unless you have any other comments with us, we're going to conclude that part of our meeting.
That's great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome and good luck.
Okay, goodbye.
Bye-bye. So, gentlemen, before we adjourn, I just want to double check with Mr. Simmons what may be coming down the pike for us, if there's anything in his line of sight.
There's one petition I was anticipating might still come in, so there may be a meeting in February, but at this point, that's iffy. I'll advise here shortly if that meeting will be taking place, but that'll be, if not, we will have a meeting in March for that request.
Very good. Gentlemen, anything amongst yourselves that you wanted to comment on? Mr. Dudek?
No.
No? All right, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.